I accept the power the rune blade offers. Moghadem. Welcome, humble adventurers, to my realm of knowledge and mystery. Here, in my cursed library, are endless tomes and scrolls on the darkest and evilest foes in all the realms, be they from Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, the many worlds of darkness, or any realm in between. Welcome to the Dastardly decimal system. I'm your caretaker of the corrupt, the librarian, Castor Cain, and supervising as always is Vega the cat. Rivalries have long since been used to define relationships. Across many realms, they have been used to motivate people to be better, like the heroes of Netherdeep and their rival company, or even the famed heroes of Goku and Vegeta. Some rivalries are good versus evil, like Elminster and Manchun. But to me personally, there is no rivalry more dangerous than that between two separate forces of evil. For today's topic, I have brewed a pot of strawberry Wraith tea. This blend of sweet and tangy strawberries will allow your spirit to take a journey of white and oolong tea. Now take a seat, have a glass, as we return to the Tomb of Horrors and talk about Moghadem, the architect of horrors. Moghadem started out as a human wizard, although some scrolls have labeled him an artificer. As a human, he was a pale man with alabaster skin normally reserved for a princess of legend. He had a pronounced nose and spiky hair colored brown and purple. His hair was decorated with strips of dyed leather, numerous beads, and some colorful ties. He wears more wristbands than a Twitch DM, including a spiked one on either hand. As an archwraith, Moghadem looks like a floating brown cloak, the edges of his cloth shooting outwards like viciously jagged blades. His face has become skeletal, with a sickly brown hue, and has a set of glowing eyes, each with a fell green in color. Its limbs are gaunt and frail, looking like the barest amount of skin pulled tight across the bones. Moghadem carries a magical sword known as the Rune Blade. This weapon can drain the lives of those it strikes, empowering and healing the wielder. Since being transformed into an archwraith, Rune Blade now serves as Moghadem's phylactery. The name Tomb of Horrors is well known and an infamous dungeon. It is built beneath a settlement that would eventually become Skull City. Filled with powerful artifacts and magical items, heroes would descend into it only to be slain by the various monsters and traps. Acererak the Devourer would watch with sadistic glee as hero after hero perished in his dungeon. While the dungeon is known as his creation, Acererak was not the architect. That was Moghadem. Let's rewind. While he was still feigning loyalty to Vecna, Acererak was looking for a way to extend his life and greatly increase his power. He had even traveled to the negative energy plane. It was there that he found the dead remains of Moyle, the city that waits. He explored the city and found powerful magical secrets, fantastical arcane engineering, and eldritch devices that were long since abandoned. What he learned in Moyle was enough to set him on the path of lichdom, but such an act would require a vast amount of souls, more than he had access to. Worse still, once he achieved that state, he would need a constant supply to replenish his phylactery. This would be achieved with a dungeon and a legion of foolhardy adventurers. But to ensure their death, Acererak recruited an artificer named Moghadem. Little is known about Moghadem before his work with Acererak. When asked, the human would say that a Serac kidnapped his family and forced him to construct his tomb. This was a lie. Moghadem had no family. That says a lot about the man, and I think we can deduce some things from that lie. Moghadem lived his life with dark, sinister plans and evil creations buzzing around in his head. But he was also, in his opinion, burdened by the rules of society. He wanted fame and the freedom to create, but did not want the woes and judgment of his peers. A Serac gave him freedom from those burdens. He gave the architect a chance to create, and, more importantly, a chance for Moghadem to have his name go down in history alongside a Serac's. Moghadem had always craved interesting challenges for his immense intellect. He wanted to create great despair and suffering. The Tomb of Horrors was going to grant him that opportunity. When Serac began to explain his desired design, borrowing ideas from his past traps and dungeons, Moghadem began building blueprints. The first step was seeking out skilled artisans and offering them high wages to come work for them, even if that was a lie. These included tiefling muralists, dwarven stonecutters, and expert sculptors. Moghadem began construction by getting Umber Hulks to dig their way into dirt and stone, before bringing in the specialist to begin with the finer details. During the construction process, both Serac and Moghadem used unique and creative ways to power their traps. This included using a component from the infernal machine of Lum the Mad to power an altar, and even going as far as trapping a Serac's Baal or Father and forcibly using his magic to power various traps. The further along the construction went, the more people they brought in. When magic began to flow throughout, they recruited Phoenix, an incubus cleric of Vecna, and his cultists to manage the altar and the connection to the lower planes. Moghadem managed all of this from his office with the assistance of his artificial mind. This was a magical construct built to look like a floating skull. It could store information, communicate telepathically, although Moghadem preferred speaking out loud at it, and even use its magic to teleport the artificer from anywhere in the tomb to right beside it, an act he referred to as an infoportation. Okay, I kind of love that name. While Serac was feigning loyalty to Vecna, Moghadem was doing something similar to Serac. He didn't have any plans to betray the future Lich, but he also held no loyalty to him either. Perhaps there should have been more caution around the future Lich, because the moment the tomb was completed and fully operational, Serac turned on Moghadem. He infused him with negative energy, transforming him into an Archwraith, and forever trapping him in the tomb. While Moghadem was constructing the Tomb of Horrors, a fellow architect was busy constructing a tomb of their own. Thessalar, the creator of various monsters like owlbears and mimics, was busy expanding the Temple of Moloch. Moghadem and Thessalar were rivals in every sense of the word. They were a pair of sadistically genius artificers, each desperate to test themselves intellectually and hedonistic enough to desire everlasting fame. The vanity of each was vast. Each loathed that the other was currently building a temple of their own, one that could challenge them for infamy. Like legendary warriors of lore, neither would allow the other to surpass them by any means necessary. For Moghadem, that meant underhanded tactics. He would lure away Thessalar's sculptors with false promises of vast salaries, and even send raids into the temple's operation. These included a gang of thieves and even a gemsmith. The thieves were a gang of were-rats led by Moghadem. They arrived under the pretense of delivering animal subjects for Thessalar's experiments, but were quickly captured. The gemsmith was a female genasi named Siodra. She was sent to the temple to steal two of its most famous gems, the Eyes of Moloch. She was intending to use them to build a phylactery for a Serac. Moghadem would even capture Thessalar's own apprentice, a thief named Nulzer, long before he was a famous mage, and used his blood as base materials for magic pigments. Moghadem was a conniver and a schemer. When heroes arrived at the tomb during construction, Moghadem began to manipulate them, trying to convince them to travel to Thessalar's worksite and free his thieves and gemsmith, or even facilitate a prison exchange, returning Nulzer and various sculptors back to Thessalar in exchange for his team. This was also a minor falsehood, as Moghadem's true hopes was that the heroes will do what heroes do and fight their way and slay their way through Thessalar's temple, crippling his operation. When Moghadem was transformed, he still retained his ability to cast spells. This was a rarity as a Wraith. But the most frightening aspect of his new life was his connection to the rune blade. The magical sword had the ability to cast blight and disintegrate while dealing additional force damage with each strike. It seemed like a sentient blade, but this was not completely true. The rune blade was actually Moghadem's phylactery. It kept his soul within it. This meant that if the Archwraith was slain, he would return to the blade. Now, if the rune blade was wielded by someone else, it drains life energy from each foe it strikes, using some of that energy to heal its wielder. Once the rune blade regains enough energy, however, Moghadem can return and possess the wielder of his cursed blade, and use that new body for his sadistic return. It seems that our tea has run out. Join me again in my library for more stories and lore about the darkest villains from the darkest realms. This has been the Dastardly Decimal System, and once again, I'm your librarian, Castor Cain. Do you love the Dastardly Decimal System and want to support us? Check out our new Patreon. Members will get access to show notes, official artwork, our new bonus episode series called Cleaning Up After Tea Time, and of course, plenty of cat pics of Vega voice actors Vash and Zid. You'll even be able to suggest a topic for a future episode. Check it out at patreon.com/Dastardly Decimal System. If you are not financially able and still want to support us, suggest the show to a D&D loving friend. It really helps us get noticed. The Dastardly Decimal System can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Blue Sky at DD System Podcast. That's Delta Delta System Podcast. Drop us a message and say hi. Vega always loves the attention. This podcast was produced by Midnight Reading Audio, a division of Midnight Reading Publishing. The voice of Castor Cain is Larry Gent. Hi. The voice of Vega is provided by my cats, Vash and Zid. Music was Tomb Tensions by Timothy Kulik from Pixabay, licensed under the Creative Commons. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.